All right.
Are we on?
Um, it says we're live.
Okay, we're alive. We're going. Ian and I are here. Hi, everybody, and Evolution JKD. We're going to be having some fun today talking about energy drills and did Bruce Lee throw out energy training, and my opinion on that, and Ian's opinion on that as well. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, I was gonna say hi everybody, but before we get started, can you hear us? And is the sound okay? It says that
Oh,
I've got,
yeah.
it says that I have sound through OBS. It says that everything is good to go, but I just wanted to make sure that everything was okay. Um, we've got poor internet quality between us. He's also in Canada, and I am in Las
I
Vegas.
have great internet connection.
Well, my internet is terrible and I'm the one streaming. Okay. Tron9 says yes. Welcome to the stream. First, you need to define exactly what throw out means. And of course, people close to him know the answer. We're going to answer that question. It's kind of, it's something to talk about.
It's
But
something to talk about. It's an opening discussion point. It's like the old here's the topic. What's that Saturday Night Live thing where he did all that stuff on it? Um, oh, hold on. Aha! I pulled it up so I can see because I'm on my computer, and so I can't see. Hi. This way I can see what you got going. Yes, it should be interesting. I'm gonna be able to see the comments as why I pulled my phone up.
yeah.
Look.
And if you guys have questions or something, then please feel free to ask away. We tend to kind of go off the deep end, but we'll catch up to them eventually.
Yeah, and I have my own opinions. My opinions are based on three major things for me. My own personal journey in training, um, of just absorbing information as an individual and having the luxury to be able to come back and contemplate these things as I often do because my brain turns that way. I've trained with a lot of people. Yes, I trained with Jerry Poteet, but I also trained with Ed Monahan, who's done both with the Concepts Group and with Jerry Poteet. I also trained with a bunch of the other Concepts people 20 something years ago. And they were really great guys and they moved really amazingly well and they put things together in a great way. It's a different cultivation thought process than what I got from Jerry Poteet. But that was then all of that, my own sort of experience of training, not just with Jerry Poteet, but also with the concepts people, but also with the other people that I've trained with, a lot of those other people, and sport and a lot of other things that I've done in the physical world, taking all of that from the experts that I've been fortunate to work with, my own experience of working with him and with my training partners, but also my real world application. And it's not just sitting in a room talking about how great I am and throwing punches in the air. Sometimes I had to use stuff. And I guess the fourth point actually is being a teacher. And that's a really big one. And there's a thing I'm going to share about that, um, which is going to tie into kind of the whole thing of energy training. Firstly, I don't think that he threw it out. I'm going to come up with a couple of points on here of Bruce Lee throwing out energy training. Firstly, I don't think people are necessarily understanding the idea of what energy training is or sensitivity training is. In every martial art that I've trained in where I had to move with somebody else, I never did forms, so I don't know how that works. But in any of the martial arts that I've trained in, like wrestling or even playing football, doing
Jiu-jitsu,
taijutsu, doing
judo.
Brazilian jiu-jitsu, judo, pick any of those. I had to work with another partner. There was sensitivity training involved in all of those, and I had to do it. And if you think about it, you have to do it. If you're doing dancing and you're doing partner dancing, you have to have sensitivity to move with your partner. And I think maybe some people are fixated on a particular drill, and I think sometimes it's yes, we worked on them, and then maybe it wasn't throw it out, but maybe like, hey, let's put that to the side for a second. I think there's a couple of reasons that Bruce might have put it to the side, and this thought really comes from one particular camp. You can figure it out pretty quickly which camp it is. They're all the same. They're all yakking about Bruce Lee threw all this shit away, and it's completely useless. But they also don't really move all that well and don't have a lot of fight experience that I've seen. Not
Lots of
necessarily
posing.
that all of them do. The ones that have, yeah, they like to pose a lot, which goes into one of the things because the person they're coming from was training with Bruce Lee when Bruce Lee was doing movies and everything he does and everything that you see from this particular lineage. They tend to pose, and it looks like movie fighting. And I have a theater degree. I can
Can I
Yeah, I
interrupt you
see
for a
it.
second, Sifu
Yeah.
Joel? I mean, I sorry to interrupt, but I think it's just ironic that these people that train didn't like when you're doing movies, you still have to work with somebody else. Like you have
Yeah.
to learn how to take a punch. Like for anybody that didn't know, I did Marvel Universe Live, which is a live action show. I was the understudy for Iron Fist, and you have to work with people where you take throws, where you take punches, where you take falls, and moving with the
Mm-hmm.
energy. And then a lot of times you actually have to emulate it. So you have to be able to have a feel of what that's actually like before you even cultivate being able to mimic it on stage or like on camera. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense that somebody could just blatantly say that energy training is like Bruce Lee threw it out. That's almost like it.
I think he might have taken it away from an individual, and there's a couple of reasons he could do that. What that individual needed to focus on in their particular training at that particular time, or what he wanted to focus on with him, um, might be something different. And that's something as a teacher I do that with students all the time. Okay, hey, stop. Let's just put that to the side. Don't even worry about that right now because maybe it's confusing you. Maybe you're having trouble with it, or maybe where I want to go with it isn't where you need to go, or maybe I've taken you where I need you to be for right now. Now I need to build up something else over here. And I think that might be in there as a student. Again, Bruce died too fucking young, man. He's 32. I'm 48 now. Ian's almost 32. Uh, and you kind of got to get into this thing of like, he didn't get to finish his thought. And we don't know, we can only guess, but throwing away energy training, sensitivity training. So if you haven't trained in Jeet Kune Do, you don't want energy training or sensitivity training. Um, they're usually called the same thing, and there's a lot of drills that develop your tactile awareness, and that's really what they're for. A lot of people don't get that. They realize that you are developing. You're not trying to learn the thing to apply it directly. You're learning it to increase your applicability of a particular tool and how you might use it against another person who is resisting you with various kinetic, feeds. They might be going this way or this way or this way, and you start with different things. And we're going to show one. Ian, do we have that clip to show?
Yeah, I'll pull it up in just a second, but I think that like one of the things that really confuse people about this stuff too is that they might see something from Wing Chun or they might see something from Jeet Kune Do and think I'm going to do this particular thing exactly in a fight. And I think that the context of it is, and people take this as a literal of like punch me, I'm going to do cross synergy. Like no, it doesn't work that way.
No.
It's not, it's not a kata where you go 1 2 3. That's what Bruce Lee was trying to get away from.
And you find this in, I mean, basketball. Let's go with basketball. And there's a million basketball drills that you can pull up and find that unless you're playing for the Harlem Globetrotters, you're never going to do it in a game. But dribbling and bouncing it between, doing figure eights around legs, but it gives you ball awareness. And there's a ton of things if you're playing hockey, if you're doing soccer, if there's a ton of things. You'll see pro athletes all the time do things you don't know. Here, this is in class, and this was one of my students, John. And just going to show a little bit of, wow, that's really loud.
Yeah, I got
it. And we're just doing cross energy, and it's just, you see a kinetic feed. He's just giving me a kinetic feed, and it's a very clean one at this point because I don't want it to be crazy. And you do it from both sides. This is just outside. You also do inside, and you just show it, so you get to feel how to. I was going to punch out, and then I get this energy, and I have to deal with it. And you're fitting in the moment, and that really comes through. It's also another reason why we use a vertical fist. This is with my lovely wife. She's much prettier than John, and we're showing the inside. Boom. And it's just learning how to circle around. You're also maintaining contact. It's forward pressure. You're still thinking hit. It's still longest weapon. You're going to go fist. Oops. I switched to the elbow. I'm not showing the inside hit on this, but just moving around. It's just helping you figure out how to problem solve in the moment and develop your tactile. I always say, and you can go ahead and drop that one.
Drop it. Like
yeah. I just wanted people to see. We might come back
Okay.
to it later for discussion, but I just want people to see it for a quick minute. You're developing this tactile. So a lot of times I say, hey, you get something here, and I'm going to teach my brain to interpret the information from my forearm by touching my hand, because I'm pretty good at interpreting information from my palm, but I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to teach here. And then later it's an add-in, as both forearms, as your brain understands how to interpret information. So I don't understand how that can be a bad deal. And I can't see Bruce Lee throwing it out just ad hoc, gone. I do know that he modified it from my conversations with Jerry Poteet, that he did absolutely modify the training. And that may have been it as well for some of the people, which goes another idea of, if you've learned it in the Wing Chun manner, if he taught you in a Wing Chun perspective and you're following those principles, and you don't understand the Jeet Kune Do principles that he was evolving and cultivating, then yeah, you might have said, hey, whoa, stop doing the energy drills because I need to come back and reteach you. But he was in Hong Kong, he was filming, he didn't get a chance. I remember Sifu Jerry saying he was shocked. He heard on the radio that Bruce Lee had died, and he like was going on, I think on the 405, and then like ended up in the ditch because he was just so shocked. Nobody expected it, and he had unfinished business, and unfortunately, it's been left to future generations to evolve it. And when that happens, things splinter a lot more. Even if you look at a more contemporary Ueshiba with Aikido, the founder of Aikido, after he passed away, he was there till he's an old man, but he died, and then it still splintered. You find different groups from the different Shihans, the different instructors. The first generation people under him had then splintered off into various factions. Now it all looks like Aikido, but they have different feels and different emphasis in their training. And I tell you, there's a lot of sensitivity and awareness training in Aikido, in wrestling, and in every martial art that I've done. There's always been sensitivity and awareness training. You may not be aware of it as a novice student. Maybe your instructor didn't preface it for you, but you're doing it, or that's a lacking on your instructor's side, I think.
I think that like you have, because you're a person that has awareness, you have a relationship with everything around you, including the world, including the biggest fist around, which is the floor.
Yeah.
But when you're working with another person, they're constantly giving you or trying to take, and having that awareness changes the context between what movement you do, but the awareness itself is what is always consistent. One thing I was going to say is that when Sifu Joel was doing cross energy with Catherine, it's not necessarily simulating a punch. It's a deflection of a hit, of a strike. So in the terms of cross energy, we're trying to reach towards the target, reach towards the goal, and there's an obstruction that comes in the way. And so we're trying to focus on getting back into hitting. Then once you do that, and we're applying the principles of JKD of trying to be efficient, using the longest weapon to the nearest target, we're developing the context to try to take that deflection or that obstruction and get back into the primary goal of what JKD is all about.
We're increasing the awareness that we have of the world around us. If I go up to you and we're gonna start punching, we're in boxing range, and I close my eyes, I'm relying on my hearing. It's not as good. I'm probably gonna get punched in the face a whole lot. So if I open up one eye, that's a little bit better, right? But and boxers deal with that all the time. That's why they have what's called a cut man. So they get all swollen up, and they're trying to take that swelling down, or they'll cut the swelling to get that blood out of there, so the boxer can see out of both eyes. Because if I'm fighting you and I've got one eye closed,
you take the blind side.
Like they're gonna zone over
Yeah.
here, and I'm just gonna take a beating. Well, it's the same idea. If I make contact with you, and I'm closing my eyes, my tactile eyes, as kind of I'm making up my own stuff here. If I'm closing this information stream, this source of knowledge gathering off, what the hell, man? That just seems idiotic to me. And I think that if you're not cultivating it in as many ways as you possibly can to achieve your goals, then I think you're seriously lacking in anything you're doing. If you're going out on a football field and you don't want to listen to the count, or you're going to close your eyes, or you're going to turn in the wrong direction, it doesn't make any sense to me. Fencers will feel it on the foil of coming through. When I did fencing, we would feel it even through the foil. Weapons training, whether it's doing like Kali, or you're doing the bow staff, you're doing sword training, whatever it is, there's a lot of sensitivity and awareness training that goes with it. If you're doing any kind of grappling, holy shit, if you're doing grappling at all,
It's like all sensitivity.
I don't care, it's in there. And it has to be in there. We did it in wrestling. We did wrestling, what's called a spin drill. One guy's down on all fours, the other guy's on top, chest to the middle of the back, and you'd spin around. And then a guy would throw an arm up, and when you feel that, you go the other way, and you'd spin the other way. So, and then feeling, sometimes you put the head up, and then you have to move through. And it was all of these feel things. And some people were very technical, and some people were very sensory oriented. I was one of those, we call them garbage wrestlers. We just sort of felt our way through everything. That's what I would do. And maybe that gave me some insight into this because I was so involved into it. I'm still a very, as I use my hands on video, handsy, touchy guy. And I get a lot of information that way, and I enjoy it that way, and I process it quite well that way. So maybe it makes more sense to me. And if you don't, maybe you're more of a visual person, it doesn't work as well for you. But it is important, because just because you're not very good at it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to gain skill in interpreting that information from there.
So Trondine says that like everyone uses tactile. It's more of a question of how deep they explore or use it. And to that
Yep.
point, if you have zero martial arts training and you rely on your eyesight, I guarantee that you have at one point or not in your life not been able to see in the dark and reached around with your hand to try to turn the light switch on.
Yep. I always use
Because
that example. You go to somebody else's house and you're visiting, you wake up in the middle of the night, you got to go to the bathroom, and you don't know where the light switch is. You're in a hotel room and you're fumbling around trying to find it. Is the same thing whenever you do. And we used to do this with wrestling. So a lot of times when you close, people think that they're going to be able to sit back here and have their eyes open the whole time. And I remember in wrestling, you would close the distance, and half the time you couldn't see anything. Guys here, I can't see this over here. And even in trapping, you can't see it quite so well. And I got this weird thing of where I can see me on my screen and I can see me on your screen too.
hmm,
um, hopefully everybody thinks it's just really cool doppelganger effect.
you don't
Uh,
have that. It's not a double thing on stream.
oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Um, sorry, I don't know what's streaming up there. I just see what I see. But when you're going through there, a lot of times you can't see this. And in boxing, you do it too. You're getting close, you're getting in clinch, boom, you're coming around. You have to feel that. That glove is even going to come around. You're going to feel through it to get that hook in there. In Muay Thai, you're going to get into a clench. Holy shit! Like that's all sensitivity
Yeah,
training.
your
Like
eyes are
clinch
down.
training in Muay Thai is sensitivity training. When you're doing the swim, when you're doing the shoulder roll, all that thing through there, getting into the throw. If you're doing judo and you're tying up, if you're doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you're tying up. Anything that you're making contact. Jeet Kune Do does it all the time. Unless you're going to sit outside. Now, if you're going to sit outside and make pot shots, again, kind of goes in that lineage. They like to sit back and go pop and then pose, and like that's going to make it work. I'm sorry, my real world experience says
Yeah.
sometimes that shit doesn't work.
You're going to punch
And
somebody and then they're going to get pissed off.
look, I've hit somebody really, really fucking hard before, and they came at me again, and I had to start throwing more punches. So I didn't get to pose and look cool. I was pretty freaking scared because he was a big, strong guy, and it wasn't just like someone half my size or going along with it, like, oh, Sifu Joel, I'll just stand here and let you beat the shit out of me, motorcycle
Yeah.
helmet kind of deal. But it was somebody really aggressively trying to come after me, and I had to stop them. I had to stop him and then deal with them again because it wasn't enough. One hit's not going to usually be enough. You need to be prepared to compound, and you see that in sport, whether it's boxing or kickboxing or UFC type stuff, where someone gets a hit, boom, and the really good fighters will capitalize on that and they'll go into it. Now that's
And
sport still, but you still see it happen, and it's a little bit easier to find examples where it's televised all over the place and we have video of it than a street fight. You see in a street fight too, but there's not usually as much publicity based on that.
you have to understand too that being successful with hitting somebody is the best case scenario. Like
Yeah.
that's like having the overconfidence of saying I have the ability to successfully strike my opponent whenever. That shit's going to fail. Like you're
Yeah.
not you're going to miss or
Can
get
you
blocked.
beat 8 billion people every moment of every day? Bullshit if you said yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the arrogance of that is the blind stupidity of that is mind-boggling to me. That I can be totally prepared and I can be a total 100% fighter. Like I was sleeping sometimes. What if you're on the toilet? Like, hey, well, someone fights you. Stranger
Yeah.
things have happened. You don't want to get caught, with your pants down, so to speak, as the saying goes. But it can happen, and you're not going to be perfect. So you have to understand that and really go into this. And I think a lot of people lack the imagination to understand the scenarios, the broader scope of what you can do outside of my controlled space that I train in.
I hit
I live in
somebody, I was
Winnipeg.
successful, they're knocked out and
Yeah, I hit a
saved the
focus
day.
mitt. I hit a focus mitt, and I feel really good about it. Yeah, okay. Well, what happens when the guy's 6'7", 330 and solid? Go, if you're having a hard time with it, look at NFL stats, look at those guys on the line, whether offense or defense. They're freaking huge.
Or what
um,
happens when a focus mid is a baseball bat coming at your face?
yeah,
You
in
know,
dealing with that stuff, you have to have, yes, distancing and timing. But what happens when you get, if I'm out at extended range and I'm using my eyes to judge distance, great. Now, when I get closer and I use sensitivity, my tactile, that's another input. And again, you're either discounting that range entirely, that you're never ever going to get into it, or you're not understanding that you need to train there. And part of that training is the sensitivity or the awareness training that comes from the energy drills. And I like to go into that you don't always have to do all of them, and you don't always necessarily know that you're doing tactile training, but a lot of times you can plant the seeds with the initial training and then come back to it. And I'm going to use that story I was talking about, I alluded to earlier, that and this has to do with Sifu Jerry passing. When I was in LA, we did Chi Sao every week. I did Chi Sao several times a week. I was doing Chi Sao all the time, and my Chi Sao went to new levels. Um, and I had a couple of my senior students, Chelsea and Mike, that I trained with in LA, and we were doing Chi Sao all the time. And then I moved. I got married, wife and I moved from California to Oklahoma. We started our family there. I started the first evolution school was there. That was 11 and a half, 12 years ago. And I was training. And then unfortunately, a year and a half later, Sifu Jerry passed away. And I didn't get to see him again. And Ian, I think you had come in at that time. You were training it by that time already.
yeah.
And we were moving, but we didn't do a lot of Chi Sao back then. We were doing basic energy drills leading up to it because it's a class situation and not a one-on-one private situation. So it's a little bit harder to take the collective up to Chi Sao level, at least for my quality levels that I want. And I was doing all the energy training with cross energy, like we just saw in there. We're doing Bong Sao, inside Lop Sao, everything in there. Inside Wampak. We're going through the five basic ones that I got from Jerry Petit that he'd worked on with Bruce Lee and the other 4 guys in the backyard at Bruce's house. I went back, it was 2 years later, because it was in June. We moved the end of June, and then 2 years later, there was a memorial service for Jerry Petit after his passing. And I came back, and Chelsea and Mike were there. And we sort of took ourselves over to the side. And both of them knew Sifu Jerry, and I trained with him. And the 3 of us took ourselves over to the side. And we paid respects. We paid homage to the man who was instrumental in our Jeet Kune Do journey by doing Chi Sao, because that's kind of a fun thing to do. And we started moving, and I remember them going, "Holy shit, Sifu, who have you been doing Chi Sao with?" And I was like, "Well, nobody." "How are you getting better?" Well, it was all the individual pieces. I understood how the whole went together, but I wasn't able to practice the whole thing. I wasn't able to practice inside of the Chi Sao structure, but the other 5 energy drills increase my tactile awareness, increase my ability to interpret information and respond and build a better picture of my opponent or my partner in this case. Oops, hit my mic, that making too much noise. Interpret that information, build that picture, and then take appropriate action in a much faster response time. And because of that, inside of a Chi Sao structure, I can move faster. Now, here's the big deal. You're supposed to start, and this could be alluding to what some of that first generation student, I won't talk about the second, third generation people. I think they might have gotten it wrong, but the first generation person, I'm going to give them, I'm not going to name names, so don't ask me. If you talk to me in private, I'll tell you who it is, but you should be able to figure out who I'm talking about. But there's also really great people, and I'm not gainsaying anybody as an individual, because that's irresponsible, and I think would be wrong, because I'm not talking about that. All the people I have met are actually quite nice as people. But if you're doing this, so the whole idea is you start with punching and kicking, and then you move closer into that trapping or that tactile, that grappling kind of stand-up grappling range, and you're moving around, and what you get into is you get to feel it, and then you move into Chi Sao, and Chi Sao becomes a game. You got to spar and move around and get down the ground, all that kind of fun stuff. But after a bit, you're just beating the shit out of each other, and there's no gains from it. It's like, I've been there, done that. Why do I got to go prove myself again and again when I have it. I've already learned that lesson. So chi sao is a great way to keep the aliveness, keep the responsiveness, keep your understanding of how things work. Now, here's a big trick on that. You move in and then you get into chi sao and everything tightens up, your responsiveness, you're being able to see that simple angle, your center line gets razor thin by doing this training because your awareness is better. You realize I don't have to move way over here. I can move here. That's enough for me. And then you move back out. So when you're seeing somebody move out here, why can they move so simply and so easily? It's because they've seen it all. Their responsiveness, they've understood your angulation. And a lot of times you don't realize the telegraph. If you're touching and I do this, holy shit, that's a giant telegraph to someone who's done enough awareness training in the tactile. It's like, you pull your hand back, it's just forward pressure, you're right in there. And that's some really cool stuff that comes from it. So for me, did Bruce Lee throw sensitivity or awareness training out? No, he might have put it on the side for an individual, but I don't think in any way, shape, form, or fashion that he would actually throw it out. He might have said, hey, throw out what you did before with the Wing Chun versions that I taught you previously, because it wasn't like it is now. I mean, you didn't have this. You didn't get to just be there. You had to be in person. You couldn't do Zoom calls. You couldn't do YouTube. You couldn't do any of that stuff. You had to film it. And everything, I remember talking to Jerry Petit about this, everything that you see filmed for Bruce Lee at the time, everything was for movies. I think, well, some of the stuff earlier when he's playing around, but even then, I think he's still preparing because he was a performer all along and he was looking into it. You don't just show up to LA and be like, hey, by the way, I'm going to be an actor. He was an actor. He had been in productions in Hong Kong. And then he came over, he was in school in Seattle, and then he moved to Oakland, and then he went to LA to act. You don't just up and do that, especially when you have a background in it already. So he was preparing for that. And he was also coming from a Wing Chun background and modifying heavily through there. Some of the earlier stuff could have been what he was actually doing. But I also think that just his personality was he was showboating. Like he liked to showboat. I mean, he was a movie star. He did like to act. He liked to be in front of a crowd and he liked to do all that stuff. And he liked to show off. And so he probably did that. And he was still, even despite him breaking through a lot of the social norms of the martial arts world, he was still reserved in that. So a lot of the things was you didn't go show everybody everything you had. So he wouldn't have broadcast it all out. That would still be inner circle. And if you haven't trained with somebody long enough, you don't know what an inner circle is. I've been fortunate to be in several inner circles, and it's you're privy to information on a different level. And like being, I trained with somebody at a seminar once. Yeah, that's great. But being with them and gaining that trust and being in that inner circle where they're going to understand who you are and where you are very intimately in your martial journey, it's a different story. Who's in my inner circle and who I allow to be in my inner circle. There's some people who think they've been in my inner circle who are not quite there just because would hold them back a little bit. And it goes in there. But I think we're gonna wrap this up. Ian, let's come up with some closing thoughts and let's see if anybody's got anything that they would like to question. Get any questions on here? Love to answer anything that you do have. And if you're watching the rebroadcast of this, please put comments in the comment section, and we'll get back to that. Get back to you then as well. So don't just think if you're not on the live feed. If you want to be in the live feed for our future conversations, then go ahead and subscribe. And then you'll be tagged into this, and then you can be part of the future broadcast. And we really love that. And I love interaction with everybody. And Ian, while you're doing that, I want to make sure that we got all the questions and comments down here.
Okay. Yeah. A couple of things for our audience. One, if you guys have questions or topics that you want us to cover in future live streams, then we would love for you to let us know. Second thing is we've been doing pretty well, but we're kind of trying to push to that 1,000 subscriber base. And we would really appreciate if you guys kind of shared our stuff or, just talked about it. We're not really concerned with being so authoritative and being the prime example of this and that. We're just trying to have a conversation, and we're trying to put some positivity out there and challenge your training in a healthy way. So with that, I'll say that whatever energy training you're doing, it's always going to serve a purpose. It doesn't matter if you're doing Chi Sao and Wing Chun, or if you're doing Wing Sung Ching Sao or Chi Sao, or if you're doing JKD, or if you're doing grappling with somebody else. But try to identify what it is that you're trying to get from that. You know, if you're just trying to build sensitivity for the sake of awareness, that's great. If you're trying to use it to serve another specific purpose, to be able to understand taking someone's balance in a throw, you want to try to cultivate that and understand that, because that's what you're going to be able to take and apply to those different forms of movement that you might already be practicing or might be wanting to get into. It's a universal skill. I cannot tell you how important that stuff is to me, even for me, for someone that does flips and, you know, uses the spring floor and feels the kinetic energy of how it gives back to me in order to jump. And then I take that and understand where the direction is going when I'm working with a partner or something. It's one of the most valuable things that I have learned as far as existing in a physical space as a human being.
I'd like to also add in that, going along with what Ian was talking about, I'm speaking as an instructor in Jeet Kune Do, but as a martial artist, it's much broader than that. I have cultivated and trained in and explored many different martial arts. And the ones that I count are, I mean, I've trained in them quite a lot. The ones I've just sort of played around with, I never say like, oh yeah, I've got a background
Ranked.
in karate. It's like, I've screwed around with karate. I've screwed around with Taekwondo, with some really great people who shared some insight with me. But I would never be like, oh yeah, I can teach you karate. I can teach you Taekwondo. I can't. I don't know that. Muay Thai, Savate, I could teach you. I could teach those. I don't teach those, but I have in the past, in other places. But the point is, the martial path is this big, and Jeet Kune Do is just one spectrum. It's just one lane that you can pick, and you don't have to be on all the time. But if you're going to be in that lane for a period of time, I want to help you get the most out of it, and not just be like, well, I'm kind of 1 foot in JKD and kind of 1 foot in karate or whatever. Get the most out of this training. And then when you go to someone else and you're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or you're going to do karate, get the most out of that, and really understand that and get that from an expert in that world who can help you dig into the depths of that knowledge base, because every martial art is going to have a wealth of knowledge in it, and none of them are going to be wrong. It's just, what did they cultivate and what did they work on? If you take Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, today is a sport, and it has a sport mindset, and you're looking at grappling, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's like wrestling. When I was collegiate wrestling, when I was in high school, it's the same thing. There's nothing wrong with it. I found a lot of benefit from that. I understand a lot of movement, but it was a sport. And I mean, I was on mats, and there was weight classes and age groups and stuff like that. Did it help me understand movement when I was bouncing in Hollywood and LA? Yeah, absolutely it did. Would I choose to go to the ground? No, not if I can help it. But did that knowledge base help me understand how not to be taken down, to give me the distancing and timing and the awareness, whether it's physical or visual, to be able to counteract to that? And do I apply that into my Jeet Kune Do training? You bet. Or maybe you should say, I apply the Jeet Kune Do and the wrestling into that. And Joel as a martial artist is not the same thing as Sifu Joel, the instructor of Jeet Kune Do. And so when we come in here, I'm giving my opinion as an expert in this particular training methodology, and hopefully you will get the benefits of that, because I'd like to share it. And I think that some of what I learned isn't necessarily out there. It's not necessarily that it's not known, but either A, the people who you're seeing out there aren't sharing that particular aspect of it, or the people who do know it and do want to share that particular aspect aren't sharing it in a way that is visible, like on YouTube or social media otherwise.
Right.
So there you go. Cross energy was our start off point, coming in there. And again, tactile awareness coming into it. Yes, you can do it off of a punch coming in, and the whole idea is circling it off and keeping that kinetic energy, but it's the whole body that is hitting, not just this punch. So when I go forward, I'm coming forward and this gets taken off. Well, everything above there is still coming forward. It doesn't stop. If a wave is coming in and it crashes down, the rest of the wave is still coming in, and that's what we want to be, is the rest of the wave. And then what we want to do is allow that to curl around and come back on as the rest of us crashes into the opponent, because it's me as a body crashing into another body. But how we do that that's what the whole martial thing is about. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining. And if you're watching this later, I hope you enjoyed it. Again, leave your questions, comments, and observations down in the comments section, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Ian, anything else from you?
Thank you guys. We appreciate it and looking forward to hear from you. Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.